April 6, 2003. The Iraq War, the Mana Bridge, just outside Baghdad. The invasion of Iraq was in full swing. American forces surged north, pushing ever closer to Baghdad. But the further they went, the more dangerous it became. Iraqi defences stiffened, ambushes grew more common, and every mile forward carried the risk of sudden, devastating attack. For Task Force 269, led by First Lieutenant John Coe Blocker, the assignment that day seemed straightforward: secure Mana Bridge, a vital crossing over the Diyala River, and hold it. The bridge was a lifeline. Without it, progress toward Baghdad would stall. But as the unit rolled forward, the desert began to change. A wall of dust rose in the distance. Winds whipped harder and harder until the sky turned a sickly, choking orange. A sandstorm of brutal intensity descended on the battlefield. Within minutes, visibility collapsed to almost nothing. Soldiers could barely see the men standing next to them. And then it happened. From within the swirling haze, Iraqi forces attacked. Massive T-72 tanks rumbled forward, their turrets silhouetted in the dust. Truckloads of infantry poured onto the bridge, rifles blazing. Mortars rained down on the pinned-down Americans. The ground shook with explosions. Task Force 269 was outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped. The sandstorm turned an already dire situation into a nightmare. Radios struggled to connect. Commanders fought to keep order. Soldiers pressed themselves into the dirt, returning fire blindly into the storm. The truth was stark. Unless help came soon, Task Force 269 would be wiped out. But in that desperate moment, someone reached for the radio. There was one hope left: air support. Would anyone dare fly into the storm? At a nearby base, the call for help came through, and two pilots stepped forward. Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Donk Strasburgger, Captain Greg Billy Bob Thornton. Their aircraft, the A-10 Thunderbolt II. To soldiers on the ground, it was simply the Warthog. The Warthog was unlike any other jet in the US arsenal. Slow, ugly, heavily armoured, but beloved by infantry for one reason: it never let them down. Built around the monstrous GAU-8 Avenger, a 30mm Gatling gun capable of shredding tanks, the A-10 could loiter low over a battlefield for hours, soaking up punishment and delivering precise, devastating firepower. It was the guardian angel of ground troops, but even the Warthog wasn't designed for this. Flying into a sandstorm was madness. Visibility near zero, instruments unreliable, enemy anti-aircraft guns waiting for a target they could barely see. Still, Donk and Billy Bob didn't hesitate. They strapped in, throttled up, and roared off into the swirling storm. Inside the cockpit, the world was a blur of red dust. Gauges flickered, alarms threatened. The two men relied almost entirely on their radios, on the calm but strained voice of Lieutenant Blocker guiding them from below. The soldiers on the ground needed them, and that was enough. Donk attempted to mark enemy armour with smoke rockets, a standard tactic to help identify targets. But in the chaos of the storm, his system malfunctioned. No smoke, no markers. The enemy tanks remained ghosts in the dust. It could have ended there, but Donk refused to quit. Thinking fast, he dropped bright flares instead. The fiery streaks cut through the storm, briefly illuminating the silhouettes of enemy vehicles. That was the opening Billy Bob needed. He pushed his Warthog into a dive, lined up the massive cannon, and pulled the trigger. The GAU-8 Avenger thundered, a deep, grinding roar, unlike any other sound in war. The gun spat depleted uranium shells at nearly 70 rounds per second. They ripped into a T-72. In an instant, the tank erupted in flame. Its turret blasted skyward in a plume of fire and smoke. On the ground, Task Force 269 erupted in cheers. Against the storm, against the ambush. Hope had arrived. But the fight was only beginning. Donk's primary targeting computer suddenly failed. The ballistic system, which calculated range and accuracy, went dark. He was left with nothing but an old-fashioned crosshair painted on his cockpit glass. No precision, just instinct. It was like fighting blind. Still, he pressed on. Run after run, Donk swooped low, using only his eyes and gut to aim. He strafed trucks, ignited supply vehicles, and sent Iraqi infantry scattering in terror. Billy Bob followed close behind, hammering another tank, then another. Each strike sent shockwaves through the battlefield, but the danger was everywhere. Iraqi anti-aircraft guns lit up the sky, firing wildly into the storm. Tracer rounds clawed upward. At one point, a missile locked onto Donk's jet and streaked so close past his canopy that he felt the aircraft shudder from the near miss. Any other pilot might have pulled back, but Donk and Billy Bob kept diving, kept attacking. Their mission was clear: hold the line until the soldiers on the ground could breathe again. The relentless assault began to break the Iraqi attack. One by one, the T-72 tanks fell silent. Supply trucks burst into fireballs. Ammunition stores ignited, sending shockwaves across the bridge. Infantry broke formation, retreating into the storm. The ambush was collapsing under the weight of 2 determined Warthogs. But the mission wasn't finished yet. Anti-aircraft guns still threatened. Each pass was still a roll of the dice. Donk and Billy Bob pressed the attack, circling back to hunt down and destroy the last enemy positions. With each strike, the storm grew quieter. The tracers slowed. The return fire diminished. Finally, the battlefield was still. Task Force 269 was alive. Manor Bridge was secure, and the enemy was in retreat. Only then, their aircraft battered and coated in sand, did Donk and Billy Bob pull back, climbing through the storm and turning for home.